Hi, we are going to talk about an absolute unit today. The original A Song of Ice and Fire Giga Chat, and also a bold little kid.
Do you know who this is?
Sir.
It's because he's bold, isn't it?
Duncan Egg. Hi, and welcome back to the House of the Stag YouTube channel. It's finally time to talk about one of my favorite parts of George R. R. Martin's World of Ice and Fire. The story of the underdog hedge knight Ser Duncan the Tall and his squire, Aegon Targaryen. God, I love these novellas so much. If you've been following me for a while on Instagram, then you already know that. I've been praising this story countless times already, and I've talked about a potential live-action show for over 5 years, especially after rumors of Game of Thrones spin-off shows started circling around. It looks like my dream is about to come true, because George R. R. Martin just revealed that such a show is actually in development. My team and I have had some great sessions with Steve and his team, and we really hit it off. He's determined to do a faithful adaptation of the stories, which is exactly what I want. These characters and stories are very precious to me. Contrary to what you may have read online, the show will not be called Duncan Egg, which could be mistaken for a sitcom by viewers unfamiliar with these stories. We're leaning toward A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms for the series title, though the Hedge Knight has its partisans as well. Today I want to explain why I'm so fascinated by the story and outline how a potential show could work. Warning, while I won't address anything major, there are going to be some spoilers. So with that out of the way, what is it all about? First of all, this story is set roughly 90 years before the events of our main story. All the dragons have died and the Targaryens have to fight for respect. There are a handful of uprisings against the throne, some of them big, some of them rather small, but it clearly demonstrates the shift in power in Westeros. While House of the Dragon will show the Targaryens at their peak of power, we would see them fighting to keep it in the Duncan Egg show. And yet, at least at first, this show would be so much smaller in scale compared to Game of Thrones. This series focuses on two characters, Ser Duncan the Tall, one of the finest knights the Seven Kingdoms have ever seen, and Aegon V Targaryen, disguised as Egg. Dunk is a peasant, a hedge knight who is offering his sword in exchange for food. While on his way to participate in a tourney at Ashford, he meets Egg and makes him his squire. Together they take us on a journey throughout the kingdoms, oftentimes finding themselves in big trouble and drawn into big historic events. So far there are 3 short stories. They were all compiled into one book, called A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, which would also make for a great title for this prequel. So, what is it that makes this story so special? This show has the potential to show us more of Westeros than we've seen in the original show. We could learn so much about all of the individual kingdoms. Contrary to Game of Thrones, the small folk will play a big part, which presents the opportunity to do a lot of world building. This show wouldn't rely on big CGI battles, dragons and White Walkers to make it entertaining. Ser Duncan and Aegon are an incredibly unique and dynamic duo. Now, I know this might come across as a story about the typical mismatched bodies that we've seen in all sorts of shows already, but trust me, it's way different. As you can expect, George R. R. Martin's cruel world separates it from the cliché. If you're a more casual viewer, think of it as the Westeros Mandalorian, Din Djarin and Grogu, but it's dark, brutal, and for grown-ups. Ultimately, it's a story about companionship, about finding purpose, meaning, and honor in a chaotic world. It's wholesome, and it features all the intrigues, backstabbing, and conspiracies that made us fall in love with A Song of Ice and Fire in the first place. We might even see 2 characters we're already familiar with, a very young Mad King Aerys and Maester Aemon. We would likely get to see how Maester Aemon ended up at the Wall, which would connect beautifully with his character in Game of Thrones.
Egg, I dreamed that I was old.
As we already know, he refused the crown, and all I'll say is that this plays a very big part. So you see, this is quite similar to Thrones, but also very clearly its own thing. The focus is on two characters. They're the center of our story, and that is refreshing in a saga that usually features up to 10 main characters. We would also finally get a live-action Bloodraven, who could become one of the key figures in this cinematic universe they're trying to build. If you are talking about a Game of Thrones franchise, you just have to bring this character in at some point. What I would give for a Bloodraven anthology series, where each season goes for a different segment of his incredible journey. This would also create space for a future adaptation of the first Blackfire Rebellion, but I'm drifting off. Now, you might say, hold up, these stories aren't even finished yet. We had a similar situation with Game of Thrones and look how it ended. I hear ya, but this is very different. We have an ending. The tragedy at Summerhall, and we know the big events that lead up to it. We know what these characters become, where they end up, and what's happening in the Seven Kingdoms. We know all of the big important historic events that occur. It's written, it's canon, and given that George is now heavily involved, I don't believe we're ever going to see such a big deviation from the source material again. What could they do that would harm this story in a way that changes in Game of Thrones harmed its ending? Also, changes are not automatically bad. For example, season 4 of Game of Thrones differed quite a bit from what was written in the book series, but it's still the best season of Game of Thrones in my opinion. That is also my argument whenever I hear people talking about the novellas being too short for a live-action adaptation. The way these characters are written allows the writers to come up with their own little adventures. It's not that complex, especially compared to the main series. If the focus surrounding the subplot stays on the relationship between the main characters and the small folk, then I don't see too many risks when it comes to implementing original ideas. That's what Aegon's character is all about. I wouldn't mind spending half a season in one region. They could show the real Dorne and establish houses we never got to see in Game of Thrones. They can also extend the short stories. A lot happens between the novellas. For example, there's a disease called the Great Spring Sickness that kills tens of thousands. Another option would be to do shorter seasons with time jumps. You would have to recast Aegon at some point anyway. Also, who says we need 10 episodes? 7 or 8 would do just fine, especially if we get to see 2 Ice and Fire shows in 1 year. And again, we have the canon. It's not like Steve Conrad will have to make it up along the way. George established it, and I'm sure he's going to reveal his outline for the 4th and 5th installment of the Duncan X stories, the She-Wolves of Winterfell and the Village Hero, as well as finally reveal what exactly happened at Summerhall. So, a lot has happened in the past few days, and I just mentioned Steve Conrad. He's the writer attached to the project, because yes, Duncan Egg is actually officially in development. George confirmed it a couple of days ago when he did his huge Not a Blog update about pretty much all things Ice and Fire. I did a breakdown of his blog post. The link is down in the description if you want to check it out. So, who is Steve Conrad? I gotta say, I never heard that name before, and out of any of his projects, I've only seen The Pursuit of Happiness with Will and Jaden Smith.
Don't ever let somebody tell you you can't do something. Not even me. All right?
All right.
You got a dream, you got to protect it. People can't do something themselves. They want to tell you you can't do it.
He is responsible for the writing on that one. I like that movie a lot. It's a wholesome story which could come in handy for Duncan Egg. Other than that though, not too sure, but George said that Steve is determined to do a faithful adaptation of these novellas. Also, he recently made another big blog post where he was introducing all of the writers for House of the Dragon. There is a big writing team working on the project, and given that he rarely ever talked about Thrones, this gives me hope that this is the standard now. We will have to wait and see. Rather than immediately jumping to my own conclusion, let's look at what information we have and go from there. Complaining about a potential Duncan Egg show is just weird to me. For now, I give them the benefit of the doubt, and that's all I have for today. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this one. What do you think? Would you like to see a Duncan Egg live action show? Let me know down in the comments below. Take care and see us later.